All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, hours before the worst debate in American history, a hugely consequential event took place here in Washington. In terms of D.C., this story is a legitimate political earthquake. For most normal folks out there, not going to really register whatsoever. But I want to highlight it and explain it to all of you so you can understand just how much of a titanic shift this event in American politics is and how consequential it's going to be for both the future of the Republican and Democratic parties. It all began yesterday with a tweet from the New York Times' Maggie Haberman reporting that Scott Reed, who until yesterday was the top political strategist at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for years, told her he was resigning his position based upon the perception that the organization has drifted left since 2016, and that the final nail in the coffin for him was the Chamber's first endorsement of 24 Democratic House members. That alone was a bombshell, which we covered here whenever it happened. The Chamber of Commerce is the premier business organization lobby in Washington. It has spent $1.4 billion on lobbying the federal government over the last 2 decades. It is by far the largest lobbying group in the country. It's outspent its next largest competitor by 3 times. For years now, it's been associated with the Republican Party, and it is what I consider one of the chief cancers at the heart of American politics. The Chamber of Commerce is the group most responsible for pushing things like so-called free trade with China, mass immigration. Basically, if you think of a regulation out there that is bad for you and it's good for big business, then they have spent millions of dollars trying to make it enshrined into law. For years, Republicans have done their bidding. That is, until Donald Trump came along in 2016. The chamber didn't know what to do with itself. The chamber couldn't get behind a Republican president who enacts tariffs on China or held that position on immigration. Even with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act pushed by Trump and the Republican Congress under him, they just could not stomach it. So the chamber did what many elite Republicans who want to push big business-friendly policies have done, especially since Joe Biden won the Democratic nomination. They have decided to back the Democratic Party. They started small with endorsements for 24 House Democrats running for re-election. But with the firing or resignation, depending on whom you believe, of Scott Reed, we now have a bigger and more explosive story. Reed told the Washington Post he left the organization because the Chamber of Commerce would not let him spend money trying to support Republican candidates in North Carolina or Maine. It's cryptic, but think about that for a second. The largest business lobby in the country, traditionally aligned with Republicans, told their top political strategists they could not spend money on behalf of Republican candidates Tom Tillis or North Carolina or Susan Collins in Maine. Okay, so let's take that one step farther, and you realize the gravity of Reed's statement, which is that the Chamber of Commerce just got caught admitting they want Democrats to take power in the United States Senate. In my mind, this is the full circle realignment occurring right before our eyes. The largest business lobby in the country has just been caught secretly admitting they want Democrats to keep the House, win the Senate, and presumably win the presidency. Why? Because they trust that unified Democratic government will be good for business interests. This is possibly one of the most damning indictments of Joe Biden and his team that has happened yet. The truth is now quite obvious. While the billionaire class and the corporations will be operationally fine under Trump, they are actively rooting for Joe Biden to win the presidency. The signs for this have been all around us for quite some time. But the Chamber of Commerce's secret admission just confirms it. Ironically, just as I was writing this, I saw a bulletin update from Goldman Sachs to their investors. The message said, quote, "A Biden win, especially in a blue wave, would likely mean greater fiscal stimulus, more cyclical upside, less trade policy risk, and a weaker U.S. dollar. Earlier vaccine availability would have directionally similar effects in our view." Now, there's some in there which I think is fair, especially the fiscal part and the thing about the vaccines. But the two most consequential parts of that statement are, quote, cyclical upside and trade policy risk. In effect, Wall Street is saying that they expect Joe Biden's presidency to have a more stable and climbing market. Worse, they expect him to end the trade war against China, which would be the greatest boon to Wall Street in over a decade. Arguably, it's as big of a win for them as the bank bailout in 2008. And as I have said so many times on the show, when people tell you who they really are, believe them. When Wall Street tells you that Joe Biden is better for business than Trump, they are not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. When the largest business lobbying organization in America is caught saying they want Democrats to control the Senate, do you think that they want that outcome because they're going to bail you out? Do you think that when Democrats embrace trickle-down economics, that it's all of a sudden going to start working? What makes me despair even more is Republicans are not smart enough to tell you about any of this. They're too busily groveling at the Chamber of Commerce's feet. Please come back and support us. A smarter party would say good riddance and point out how the Democratic Party, no matter how it wants to sell itself, now has just as much of a claim to being the party of big business as the Republican Party did in 2015. In fact, Axios reported 2 weeks ago, when Trump and Pence heard about the chamber's decision to endorse Democrats, they got on the phone and admonished them. Of course they did. How is it that the chamber is always the group that politicians fight over for support? We all know the answer. I mean, it's kind of incredible, right, Crystal? First of all,
it
hurts bad, right? Because now you're like, wait a second. So you have the Republicans and these Republican senators like, please support us, please, we need your money. And the Democrats are like, oh yeah, we'll take all that money.
Buddy.
They're like, come on in. You want the chamber's endorsement? I mean, this is a big deal. The fact that they got caught admitting they want a Democratic Senate, that tells you everything you need to know. They do not do this if there are trillions on the line for these people.
Well,
they know what they're getting.
The fact of the matter, I mean, I think I look at it a little bit different than you, but this is part of the illusion of Donald Trump. I said before in the show that the best thing about him is the people that hate him.
Yes.
Like, if you were to judge him just by the people that hate him, you would think that he's been incredible, right? Like, Chambers kind of jumping ship, Wall Street is like, let's go with Joe, you know, all of these people that are easy to despise and have, like, destroyed the country hate Donald Trump. If you just judged him by his enemies, you'd be like, he's amazing. But then you look at the fact that he's been fantastic for the this freaking corporate tax cuts all around, people that don't need them, Fortune 500 companies not paying any taxes whatsoever. He wants to do the payroll tax cut. He wants to do a capital gains tax cut, stripping regulations, destroying labor rights. Like, all of these things are on the chamber wish list. In fact, remember, we covered here on labor rights, his NLRB, National Labor Relations Board,
is run by the chamber.
Ticked off every single one of the Chamber of Commerce's priorities. Every one. They're like, you got it, you got it, you got it. So he's been phenomenal for them. But they look at Biden and they're like, he's more predictable. Yeah, he's not going to do the tariffs on China. They like that, even though, I actually supported the president in the tariffs and the approach to China. I don't think he ultimately did that good of a job executing it, but I did support initially the approach. They like that. They think it'll be just more sort of calm, stable, and predictable, even though around the margins he'll do, he'll roll back some of the tax cuts. They won't be that happy about that, but ultimately it's not really going to affect their bottom line. And he went out and explicitly pledged to them that nothing was fundamentally going to change, and pledged to them that he wasn't going to actually change any laws in order to force better behavior from Wall Street or corporations. So they don't have anything major to fear, and it'll just be a little bit like calming of the waters.
Right. So here's the thing with the Trump in the chamber. Even though Trump has by and large given the chamber mostly what they want, even the appearance of defection, they cannot countenance that. They're like, nope. We cannot do that for you. And then, if I was you, I'd be pissed about this. The Democrats are like, hey, come on in. Like, hey, we'll take your money. Right. And then what's happened now is that you have two parties essentially fighting for the Chamber of Commerce's vote. The Chambers decided to pick the Democrats this time around, I think with pretty good reason. If I was a Chamber of Commerce, I would want Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden to rule America, right? Yeah. That's how you get your SALT taxes. They'll repeal parts of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I'll have a bridge to sell you if they think they'll repeal like a lot of the corporate parts.
Yeah, I hope every Democrat who got endorsed by the chamber, and they are some really lame ones, by the way, I hope they all face serious primary challenges, because it is shameful to have this group backing you, in my view. That's just it, plain and simple. I think it's smart from the chamber's perspective, though. I know this has roiled them, but if you can play both sides and have both parties like fighting to win your backing and your money, then that gives them even more power than what they've had in this town, which is why this is so distressing.
Yeah, and what we really, again, I will keep saying this until I'm blue in the face, the greatest political opportunity in this century, as we saw in 2016, is to be against the chamber. going around the chamber. The chamber does not want what is best for this country.
No.
And they do not want what's best for you, almost certainly. They want what's best for them and mostly for China. So what you need to do is go around them. If you can explicitly run against them, then you will win, and you will win big. But nobody wants to listen. They both want to beg at their feet. So until then, we're screwed.
Great stuff.
All right.
Still to come, a telling story about the uneven way that the pandemic economy is impacting Americans as Congress struggles to reach a second stimulus deal. Senior reporter at the Huffington Post, Zach Carter, is going to weigh in on all of that when Rising returns.